Oh hey, I didn't see you there. But since you're here, on today's Soundiron session, we're going to be breaking down a crushing metal track using Voices of Rage, Axe Machina, and knockout drums. Stick around. Hello again everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Soundiron Sessions. My name is Craig Peters, and in today's episode we're going to be getting heavy. So this is a demo that I put together using the new Voices of Rage that we released pretty recently. We're also going to be using Axe Machina as well as knockout drums. So this is a track that I wrote for a client a while back. He reached out and he wanted something in a deathcore style with a lot of those really huge breakdowns, big bass drops, and a lot of brutal and aggressive riffing. And since we just released the new Voices of Rage update, I thought this would be a great track to use as a bass to simulate as if you were in a band and you wanted to use this as a way to give some ideas to your singer. So they don't necessarily have to use the same words. If let's say, the lyrics are going to be based on something else, that's fine. Just as a way of just getting out ideas, maybe certain vocal rhythms that you have and that sort of thing. So I'm going to go ahead and play for you a little bit of this track, and then we'll start going through it and I'll show you how I use Voices of Rage in this track as well as using Axe Machina and knockout drums. So let's check it out. So as you can hear with the way the track starts, it's got those elements that you would expect from a deathcore track with just, some blast beats and then going into some more syncopated breakdowns. So a little bit of how I wrote this song, it started pretty much with this riff. And then I thought, well, what would be a cool way to intro the song without just going straight into the blast beat part? So I thought it'd be cool to write this sort of trem-picked riff. I'll go ahead and solo Axe Machina so you can hear how the guitar is going. And what I did is I added this filter on top, so it has this kind of sweeping filter that goes into where everything else starts. So with Axe Machina, you have a few different options, and one of the really cool things is that you have this dual mode right here. And with the dual mode, you can have just one track playing all the riffs. And you'll hear it hard panned left and right. But for instances where you want to have harmonies, that's where having the guitar 1 and guitar 2 really helps. So that way you can have a completely different guitar on the left and right, and you're not going to have to worry about any notes being doubled or mono or anything like that. So you can hear that on the guitar left. Then on the right you have the harmony. So it's really cool to be able to do that kind of stuff, because especially when you're doing metal or any kind of guitar music really where you want to have harmonies, you definitely don't want to have to worry about any kind of conflicting notes or anything like that. So it's a really cool thing that you can do with this. And then for the most part I have the dual mode because a lot of times I don't really have a lot of harmonies. So if we get rid of this, you can see the only time there's harmonies is just in a few different spots. Like down here I have this part where there's these guitar pans going on. And I thought that was a cool idea. I thought it would be a cool way to go into this breakdown section with the guitars just kind of doing this like triplet panning part that goes back to back. And then it actually goes into that section, and then you'll see that it goes back to the dual mode for Axe Machina. So let's check that out.
Nothing ever happens to anyone but me.
I want to talk about some of the stuff that I did with Voices of Rage. I thought a cool way to enter the song with some vocals is just going straight up growls. So let me go ahead and solo the vocals so you can hear how this sounds. actually using another singer from the library as well. I'm using the Aaron Effects, and he's got some different ones. So as you can hear, as I'm playing around on the keyboard, there's a few different variations from more like higher, raspier sort of growls to more guttural and really kind of raw and aggressive ones. So for this style, I definitely wanted to go a little bit more in the guttural range, but I did use some aspects from Redouan because he did some of these like black metal high screams that sounded really cool. So being able to layer those together are really neat. So I want to go to this section right here, and I'm going to play the music and then show you how I layered some of these vocals together. So I'm going to go ahead and solo these vocals so you can hear how they sound. I'm going to pull this up so you can see the words. So some of the lyrics that I chose for this, I tried to think of something that would fit in this kind of style. There are some bands that, you know, especially in the metal realm, that sing a little bit more of a blasphemous tone. So I figured I would kind of go that route. So as you can see, it's beg your God. So, I mean, it seemed to fit and it sounded cool. So I went with it. And I'm going to go ahead and solo just the highs so you can hear how they sound. Then together. And in this kind of style, whether it's death metal or deathcore or anything in the more death metal realm, it sounds really cool to combine lows and highs. I do this in my own band as well, and it's just really cool. And I really think it fits, and it's nice to have that variation of like the more higher screams and the really low burly sort of guttural screams or growls, because it just sounds really cool together. And since it's the same singer, it fits as well. So one of the really cool things in Cubase that I like is they have these expression maps, and I built this one for Ex Machina. It makes it really easy for doing any kind of articulation switching. So I have a map set up to where I can just program in these notes. And then you can see right here, I programmed in this pitch bend as if I was taking the string and pre-bending it and then letting it release, just to give it a little bit more of that kind of realistic swagger. And you can see there's certain ways that I programmed the guitar. So I have these palm mute alternate, and that's where it's set up to where it just alternate picks, and it makes it really easy. I don't have to program in downs and ups for each note. It just kind of does its thing. And then over here, I have these downstrokes, because if you were playing the riff on those jun-juns, I would normally pick those with just downstrokes because they sound a little bit more aggressive. And then I'm also playing around with some of the different velocities as well. So when you have these maxed out, it can sound a little bit unrealistic. So it's a little bit too aggressive. So I dial those back so you get a little bit more of that fuller, warmer sound, and you can really hear that pick attack. So it's just really cool to be able to program in all these different types of articulations to really match what a guitar player would do. And then for the drums, I'm using our knockout drums that we did in collaboration with Naveen Kaprwise and Zach Oren. Just a really killer metal drum library, and it just has that sound that I would want for this kind of track. So I'm going to solo this so you can hear how the drums sound. I just love the way this drum set sounds, and the toms are honestly my favorite that I've ever used in a drum library. So I really love how this sounds. I really didn't do much processing because I'm using the Pure Steel Pro preset that Zach made for this library. So it's really cool that these presets are kind of just like set up to just go. And I really like that, especially when you're trying to work fast and you don't want to have to do a lot of mixing or anything like that. It's really handy to use these presets. There's a bunch that he made as well. And then I also have some programmed bass. Let's do that with the guitars. Let me go ahead and start this from the beginning. And you can hear around this middle section, I'm bringing in some other highs just on certain sections just to kind of highlight it and make it stand out a little bit more. So the thing that you heard before was the word master. So with the word master, it's really cool because you have all these lists of words that you can use and just kind of use these to like fill in where the phrases don't maybe work for you. Or you can just really use these to try to create your own lyrics and do that whole thing. So it's really handy to do that. There's a word list, and then you also have a sequencer where you can program in different words as well and kind of write it out. So you can use all these different words to do that. So you can...
Failure.
And one of the things I like about this is that you can just...
Flesh. Flesh. Flesh.
So if you just want to use this single word and just kind of like pop it in there real quick, or if you want to just have it
Flesh.
kind of ring out over a long section, you can do that. Or you can use the phrase master. So let's check out the phrase master. I'm going to load this up. And what's cool about this is you have these different lyrics that were written, and there's little chunks that were recorded, so you can use certain sections of this, use the whole section, or just pick and choose.
To open up all that I've said.
So one of the really cool things about the library is that you have this natural sync or variable option. So if I have it just set to natural.
This Jordan vision.
And then one of the really cool things is you can use this stretch knob right here. And what this allows you to do is when it's in variable mode, you can map it to your mod wheel and you can make it to where it's...
We always put together. We always put together.
So the cool thing about that is that you can really match these phrases to the tempo and customize them, have one part kind of fast.
I'll come around.
So you can have it to where it's like quick and then dragged out. And I really like that option because it can really allow you to match these phrases to your track, which is really cool. And you can see that I have some automation down here that I did to make this match.
So takes my time. Stirs my oxygen.
See, I kind of dipped it down here a little bit.
Slow like a suicide.
What's that?
Fuck that watch. By my side.
Then I kind of dragged it out towards the end a little bit just to kind of make it hang a little bit more over that riff. Then hear it in context.
So takes my time. Stirs my oxygen. Slow like a suicide. Fuck that watch. By my side.
And then looking at a little bit of the drum programming, for the most part, everything's pretty quantized. And I have this drum map that I made, and it makes it really easy for programming drums. If you guys want to see a video on setting that up, we can do that. Just let me know in the comments if you guys would want to see something like that. And I really like the way that these drums sound, especially for the really tight and fast, sort of aggressive death metal stuff.
Takes my time.
And you can see on these blast beats down here, I have it to where the snares are a little bit lower dynamically. I brought the velocities down because anyone who plays this kind of style isn't hitting super powerful this fast. And I mean, there are exceptions to the rule, but for the most part, when you listen to any kind of death metal, the snares are usually a little bit more softer in dynamics. It sounds more realistic. I mean, if you were to crank these, you would have to be a machine and some kind of gnarly human drumming robot, but it just sounds a little bit more natural when you take those velocities down. And I really love the sound of these toms, like I mentioned earlier. They sound really full, really punchy, and you could really hear the sound of Naveen digging into the toms, and it was really cool how this turned out. So let's go ahead and keep listening to the track.
Slow like a suicide, more unpredictable.
So you can hear we're really getting into that deathcore territory, and with this style, there's a lot of those really like open chord, dissonant, chuggy breakdowns. So I thought that would be perfect for this since that's what he wanted. He wanted something that was more of that really big, dissonant deathcore kind of style. So as this breakdown comes in, the guitars do this thing where it kind of cuts off, and I wanted it to have that sort of like glitchy cut off sound like right before this big breakdown was to drop. Big old growl leaning over it. Then we have some other uses of the word master. You can see the different words that I'm using. I thought it would be cool to say wretched flesh, because this song seems like it's very kind of like brutal lyrically. So I wanted to kind of use some of those words to really have that more death metal, deathcore style. And then after this, I thought it would be cool to use one of the phrases, but then do some processing to it to kind of make it all distorted. And what I did is I utilized some of the effects within the effects rack of the library. So there's this stomp lo-fi. If I turn this off, you can hear how this sounds.
Let you suffer.
So I have a rotator on here. Let me turn that off too.
Let you suffer.
But I wanted it to have this more like affected type sound. So I put this rotator on here, this stomp lo-fi, which gives it that kind of lo-fi gritty sound. And then I also did some filtering on here just to kind of darken it up a little bit. And I thought that was cool, and I thought that would be an interesting way of using the vocals into the next section, which then has these lows and highs as the riff kind of keeps going and has this really more upbeat, chuggy kind of sound. Then you can hear we got these bass drops, and since he wanted those big subby bass hits, I thought, well, got to put some in there. So let's listen to this. It's just this low sub bass drop, and I have it in G sharp because that's what my guitar was tuned to. So I have that there. And then you can hear that we start to bring in some choir. I thought it would be cool to utilize some more symphonic type elements. So let's listen to just the choir. And for this, we're using Olympus, This is Olympus Elements, and it's got the bass and tenors, so let's listen to that. And then I thought we'll give it a little bit of a break before it comes back into that riff that we've heard before, sort of bringing some riffs back. Because if you're writing a track, you got to bring some of the heavy back, you know? So I thought it'd be cool to use some more sound effect type things, since you hear that in that kind of style. And this is from Glitch Hero using the Shutter Ensemble. I'll listen to that by itself. Just this kind of big, glitchy, kind of weird, dark sound design element. And I thought that would be a cool way to go back into that heavy chug riff. And then sort of bringing that intro riff that we heard and then going out with that. I thought that'd be a cool way to kind of like, you know, do a little bit of that bookending type style where you kind of have something in the beginning and then you bring it back in the end. So I thought that would be cool. You know, I want to talk about some of the processing that I did for some of these instruments. So for the guitar, if I was to disable this, it's just DI. And the beauty of having the DI is that you can reamp it any way you want. You can use amp sims, and some of my favorites that I like to use are from Neural DSP. This is the Gojira, and just sounds perfect for this kind of style. And if I turn this back on, and you can see, since this is on the dual mode track that has both the guitars hard pan left and right, I have this stereo enabled. So if it was mono, it wouldn't sound right. So being able to have it stereo is really cool because you can have this on a bus for two guitars. And let's say if you tracked a guitar left and a guitar right and you bus them and then put this on the bus, you can just set it the stereo and you can only have one instance. So any changes you make, you can just make the changes to the one instance and then it'll affect the sound of both guitars. So that makes it really handy. But I also have this on the individual left and right tracks as well, just to maintain that same kind of tone. And then as far as the processing, I have some post-processing on here, just kind of carving off some of that low end that we don't need, because when you're hearing this with the bass, like, we don't need all that low end from the guitar because that's where the bass comes in. So when it comes to mixing metal, I really like to kind of make space for everything that, you know, when it comes to the kick and how that relates to the low end of the bass and how the low end of the bass relates to the guitar, and really kind of having everything fit its own space. And then I just did a little bit of carving here just to kind of clear that up a little bit. So let's turn this back on. So you can hear by carving out some of those low mids, it kind of makes the guitar sound a little bit more clear because you're taking out some of that kind of woofy sound that you can get from distorted guitars, especially because when you're miking cabs or anything like that, you get a little bit of that low end or that low mid buildup. So being able to carve some space out for that really helps. And then I also have some other processing on my guitar bus as well. So we have this Puig Tech, and I really like using this on guitars. I learned this from Keith Marrow. He did a little tutorial on his YouTube channel where he was showing how he likes to process his guitars, and I'm a big fan of his guitar sound. So I was pretty much just trying out his settings, and I really like how it sounded. And then I'm also using this Shadow Hills on here, and this is really cool, especially for just kind of like diming all the guitars and really kind of like making it push and have that nice compressed sound. And then on the guitar bus, I'm also using this Pro MB, and this is kind of simulating that Andy Sneap trick that he does on the guitars. He used to do this with a Waves plugin, but I like it on the Pro MB because I really like FabFilter plugins. So this is just basically really compressing those low mids on the chugs just to make them a little bit more clear, because sometimes it can get a little bit woofy, especially on those big chuggy parts. So if we find a section that has more of that. So you can really see it kicking in, especially on those more palm muted parts. And pretty much what I'm doing is just kind of focusing around this section, and then I'm just dialing in the threshold just to where it's touching on the parts where there's a lot of palm muting going on. And then I also have this Waves S1 imager on here, and I'm just using this just to add a little bit of width to the guitars, just a touch, not a lot, because you don't want to make the guitars sound like they're out of phase and just kind of way too spaced out. So you can go too far with this, but I just wanted to use a little bit of it, and this is how it sounds with. So just by adding a little bit, you can hear the guitars get a little bit wider. So if you really want that wide guitar sound, adding this on your guitar bus, but just a touch, can help with that. And you can also do some other tricks like this as well if you're doing different types of EQ on guitars. So if you have a certain boost on one guitar and then a little bit of a dip, and just having that tonal variation of like maybe a little bit of a darker tone on one side and a little bit brighter on the other, it can help with that wide guitar sound as well. And then for the drums, I also have a little bit of drum bus processing. I got this SSL G comp on here. So without. And this is just giving a little bit of that drum compression just to kind of glue the whole kit together. Now I'm going to show you a little bit of how I process the vocals. So some of the plugins that I have this FabFilter Saturn on here. I'm going to go ahead and bypass all the plugins that I have on the vocal mix bus, just so you can hear how this sounds. So this is just adding a little bit of saturation to the vocals. So if I take this off, turn this on. Yeah, so just giving it a little bit of saturation. And then I have some virtual tape on here as well. Turn this on. And then we also have some of that virtual channel on here. Let me open that up. So same thing as the way I process the guitars, almost like if I was running these through like an analog outboard gear, and I just want everything to have that kind of like analog board sound. So I like to use these in conjunction with each other. And then I'm using this Soar plugin. This is from JST. And this is a really cool plugin, especially for vocals, for just giving it that kind of stereo delay effect where you know, it's not really used to be heard in the mix, but just something to kind of fill out the sound. So if I bypass this again, so just dry. If I turn this on, so you can hear it's got that left and right sort of stereo bouncing effect with the delays, and I really like how that sounds, and when you hear it in conjunction with the whole mix. So it's not really present in the mix, but you can hear it on those parts where those syncopations stop. So when there's those empty spaces, you can hear it filling out the sound, and that's why I really like this plugin, especially on vocals. And then on each individual track, I'm using gain reduction from JST. This is a really cool plugin, especially for vocals. And it's really awesome if you use this vocal for tracking. This is what I used when I was tracking the vocals for my solo project, Destroying the Devoid, and it just really helped with making the vocals just present, and especially while tracking, just making it a little bit easier for tracking as well. So if I solo gain reduction on this instance of Voices of Rage, you can hear how it sounds without. If I turn it on, it just gives it a little bit more of that like over compressed sound, and really makes the vocals just kind of, I don't know, it just like hits the track really well, and I really like how it sounds in the context of the mix. All right, so before we wrap up this video and play for you the entire track, I want to talk a little bit about how I mastered it and some of the plugins that I used. If you've watched some of our Soundiron sessions, you'll see some of these look very familiar. So right here, I'm using Gullfoss, and I just have this set to just kind of help clean up some of the mix, because a lot of times you have a lot of different frequencies going on, and using this on something like buses or groups, it's really meant for that. So with this completely bypassed of all the mixing plugins, this is how it sounds. Now if I turn on Gullfoss, kind of cleans it up and just makes it sound better, and I really like how that sounds. And then I also have the virtual mix rack on here, and I have a couple different plugins. So I got this virtual mix bus, and then I have this trimmer on here just to give me a little bit more headroom. And with this on and off, you can see now we're getting a little bit more of that reduced volume, because we're going to be doing some processing later on to bring that volume back up. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how I added some of these other plugins. So I also have this SSL comp again. I love this on a mix bus. It just really gives it that sound that I like, and as far as gluing the whole mix together. So with this on, in general settings is auto release. I like the attack on 30. Usually the ratio is a 4:1, and then I just adjust the threshold to where it's in between 0 and 4. And then the next thing is we have this virtual tape machine again. And I like using this across different channels, because in the end it kind of really like adds more to the mix, and just like filling in different frequencies and different saturation and stuff like that. And then I have a little bit of EQ on the mix bus. This is just kind of boosting a little bit of lows and then taming a little bit of some of these like low mids to high mids. Very subtle. And then I got this Pro MB. I was experimenting around with using some multi-band compression on the mix bus. I was just playing around with some presets, and I found this one. It's this like tight bass and controlled highs. And I was just kind of playing around with the settings a little bit. And then the next two plugins are going to be for boosting up that level and getting it to what you're more used to hearing when it comes to more like modern metal productions. So I have Flatline on here, and this plugin, one of the things I really like about it is how simple it is. There's also some different presets to play around with too. So I haven't really experimented with those, but I've watched some tutorials on how Ermin uses it, and I really like it. So I have the threshold around -3.72. The shape, I have it around 96%, and you could play around with this. The shape just kind of affects how much it's like hard clipping, or you can do soft clipping. So I like to keep it around here. And then the output, I just leave it. So with this, you can hear it's already boosting that level and kind of getting it more to that finished mastered sound. And then to finish it off, I got this Pro L2 on here, and this is another FabFilter plugin. I usually use a different limiter. I used to use the Isotope, but I used to have Pro L a long time ago, and I wanted to get it again and start using it for more mixing and mastering stuff. So with this, so this is just combining some different plugins to get that final mastered sound, and just or that more like louder level that you would expect from this. So I like to combine different types of limiters, because it's nice to kind of spread the wealth a little bit, so you're not just taking one limiter and just cranking it. So this is how I go about doing the mixing and mastering for this track. Now let's go ahead and listen to the whole track in its entirety. So let's check that out.